regarding moksha. So the system of political control of British India hinged on identifying interest groups willing to collaborate, a governing style often described as divide and rule. As a matter of fact, even the partition of India into two or say three countries is often seen as a fallout of the divide and rule policy. This, to my mind, is a very simplistic analysis. The people who advance this argument also highlight the glory of Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb culture. If this mixed culture was so powerful, why has it not been revived after the departure of the British? If only the British were responsible for creating a chasm between Hindus and Muslims, the gulf between them should have been bridged by now. After almost 70 years of their departure, the Congress party could not revive itself in Pakistan, though it claimed a large following amongst the Muslims and the Muslim-dominated areas. I am sure no sane person will blame the British for it not being revived there. Similarly, the Indian branch of the Muslim League continues to be active in India despite no resistance or despite no interference from the British. But they have not made roads into the Hindu areas. Again, the British cannot be blamed for this failure on the part of the Muslim League. On the other hand, after the World War II in 1945, Germany was divided into four parts, which were consolidated into two in 1949. However, the world could not keep them two for long, and German unification, or rather reunification, took place in 1990. Can India, Pakistan and Bangladesh think about the reunification if they were really a faulty creation of the British? If they represent one culture and if they represent one race, what stops them from coming together? In India at least, one minor group is there that talks of Akhand Bharat, one undivided India, but unfortunately this group is demonized as Hindu chauvinists. It is also well known that even the Muslims could not stay together in the name of religious identity, even for 25 years, and had to come to exist as two nations. Since my approach to partition fiction is that of a new historicist and not of a new critic, I shall make frequent references to Indian cultural and historical practices of India to take insights from them. I shall also talk about the background of the authors and evaluate the need to discuss partition fiction in a conference like this. Because the time at my disposal is very limited, I sometimes may make politically incorrect abstract statements with which you may disagree. As an Indian pluralist, I welcome disagreements as well. Partition of the Indian subcontinent into India and Pakistan is not simply a matter of historical record, but the literary representations of this event are equally important, for they record the history of the individual narratives. There is no exact number of people lost, killed and displaced during and after the partition, but estimates range from a few hundred thousand to 2 million killed and more than 10 million displaced. This data, as a matter of fact, is lying with statistics, as there is no data available of the Hindus and Sikhs who migrated to Pakistan from India, or Muslims who migrated to India during the days of transfer of population in the aftermath of the partition. Probably there were none. No Hindu migrated to Pakistan and no Muslim migrated to India. This is the historical reality. There is no data available because there is none. Thus, one should explicitly say that after the partition, Hindus and Sikhs migrated from Pakistan to India, and only Muslims migrated to East or West Pakistan from India, though in 1947, neither India nor Pakistan was a theocratic state. India chose to become a secular country in 1976 by 42nd Amendment during emergency when there was no opposition in the parliament. Remember this. This was passed when there was no opposition in the parliament. All the political leaders, opponents, they were behind the bars. So they chose to name this country as a secular country, while Pakistan adopted the name of Islamic Republic of Pakistan and declared Islam as the official religion in 1956 without any opposition. Here there was no opposition, here also there was no opposition, but the situation was entirely different. This question is related to their own identity and the association and expectations of the people of the newfound nations. The memories of displacement and violence that was there after the partition still linger in the hearts and minds of the people. More so because neither of the two or none of the three nations that were created nor the world at large learned the right lessons from it. We are once again amidst a sort of communal frenzy where the world seems to be confronting the clash of civilizations. However, W.B. Yeats believed that the East knew how to survive a tragedy. In a letter to Dorothy Wellesley, he wrote, I quote, "But no, I'm wrong. The East has its solutions always and therefore knows nothing of tragedy. It's not we, not the East, that must raise the heroic cry." Unquote. In the present day scenario, in the backdrop of CAA, should it be called a tragedy or a tale of woe? I leave this question to you, dear readers or dear listeners. Writers like Anis Kidwai, Sadat Hassan Manto, Rajendra Singh Bedi, Krishan Chandar, Bhishma Sahani, Yashpal, Kamleshwar, Ismat Chugtai, Kushwant Singh, Rai Masum Raza, Abdul Hussain, Manohar Malgankar, Amrita Pritam, Chaman Nahal, Sampurn Singh Gulzar, Yasmin Khan, Bapsi Sidhwa, and many more have written novels, novellas, and short stories on the subject immediately after the partition and later also. They tend to create the history of the unprecedented violence, carnage, arson and looting, horror, madness, bestiality, and rape that followed in the wake of the political decision in all their details in their long and short fiction. The stories largely deal with the depiction of the woes of displacement, separation and exile, loss of mutual faith, religious fanaticism, forced conversions, agony born of uncertainty in terms of place, livelihood, insecurity in the present and future, abduction of women, violation of women, both voluntary and involuntary killing of women, honor killings, charlatanism in the name of social work, and other such issues. One is greatly moved by the tales of human suffering, sacrifice, and degeneration of the values on which any civilization hinges their fictional renderings of the events around partition, and they successfully bring into focus the human face of the tragedy. The authors very successfully highlight not only the best but also the worst of human emotions in the moments of crises, but in most cases they do not attempt any historical or social or religious or political explanation for the violence. The stories do not give any insight into the causes of the suffering of their, as their authors find all the happenings taking place too suddenly and overnight and at the spur of the moment. The fictitious and secure world of the fictional realities, surrounded by fictionally secure walls of a shared tradition, shared culture, and a shared history, come crumbling down too suddenly for them. They are unable to analyze the circumstances that made the people of different communities enemies so suddenly, though they had apparently been living in harmonious and a peaceful coexistence, till the time the British intention of departure from the country became clear. Perhaps it is a tall order to expect this from a literature, for there is always a danger of historical fiction being rendered into or political or propaganda fiction. The two-nation theory propounded by Muslim leaders that ultimately led to partition was based on the assumption that Hindu and Muslim cultures constitute two distinct and frequently antagonistic ways of life, and therefore they cannot coexist in one nation. In his presidential address of the Lahore session of the Muslim League, Muhammad Ali Jinnah said, I quote, "It is extremely difficult to appreciate why our Hindu friends fail to understand the real nature of Islam and Hinduism. They are not religious in the strict sense of the word, but are in fact different and distinct social orders. And it is a dream that the Hindus and Muslims can ever evolve a common nationality. And this misconception of one Indian nation has gone far beyond the limits and is the cause of more of our troubles and will lead India to destruction if we fail to revise our notions in time. The Hindus and Muslims belong to two different religious philosophies, social customs, and literatures. They neither intermarry nor inter. For example, Ismat Chugtai, in her short story Roots, depicts deep-rooted love between the families of Dr. Roop Chand and Abba, the father of the Muslim narrator, though the members of the families had different political affiliations. Despite their belonging to as divergent political parties as Congress, Socialists, Communists, Muslim League and Hindu Mahasabha, they had been staying in harmony for 3 generations in the civil lines area of some town in the state of Marwar. The doctor used to dine along with the members of his family in the narrator's house. There were no societal differences between the two, and they not only lived in harmony but also thought of strengthening this unity by marrying into each other's family. Thus, the two families had the interdining relationship, Roti Sambandh, which they wished to convert into intermarriage relationship by marrying into each other's family, Beti Sambandh. The Hindu doctor Roop Chand used to treat the patients of the Muslim neighbor family without charging any fees, as if he were treating the members of his own family. After Abba's death, this relationship of harmony and love not only continued but also got strengthened as the doctor undertook the responsibility to look after the deceased friend's family. No major decision in the Muslim family was taken without taking the considered opinion of Dr. Chand, who took decisions for them, the Abbas family, as if he were its head. Similarly, Khushwant Singh, in his Train to Pakistan, depicts the communal frenzy had never entered into the minds of the people of Mano Manjara, and that the Hindus and Muslims lived like brothers. The community life was so strong that even the immoral and illicit relationships thrived among them. The Hindu Lambadar assures, soothes and encourages his Muslim villagers not to get scared during the riots and leave for Pakistan, saying, "You are our brothers. As far as we are concerned, you and your children and your grandchildren can live here as long as you like. If anyone speaks rudely to you, your wives, your children, it will be us first and our wives and children before a single hair of your heads is touched. And with a warm voice, he said, if you decide to stay on, you are most welcome to do so. We will defend you with our lives. One of the young men in the village joined with him, saying, as long as we are here, nobody will dare to touch you. We die first, and then you can look after yourselves. And finally, the Lambadar embraced Imam Bakhsh and started to cry loudly as Sikh and Muslim villagers fell into each other's arms and wept like children. Likewise, in his story Gadariya, Shepherd, Ashfaq Ahmed depicts how a Hindu teacher, Munshi Champat Rai, fondly called Dauji, a shepherd by caste and initiated into the world of learning by a Maulvi, in turn takes care of Muslim children, Aftab and Golu, both the sons of a reputed doctor, who are not only poor in studies but also disinterested in them. Ashfaq has all the sympathies with this small-time teacher, who is a very humble person, though poor but contented. He is humiliated not only by the people outside but also his own wife, a diabolic, angry woman. However, the entire family is satisfied with their lot and has no complaints whatsoever and lives in harmony with their Muslim neighbors. Dauji knows the Quran well and takes interest in Persian poetry. He is grateful to the Maulvi Sahab for transforming his life by teaching him Arabic and Persian. He in turn takes tutorship as a mission. Not only he, but his entire family, despite being poor, take care of the Muslim boys, and as a result, both of them not only pass their examinations, but also start taking interest in their studies. Dauji's family is of limited means, no doubt, but they are not only in any way mean in showering affection on the Muslim boys who come to stay with them. Similarly, when the doctor Sahib comes to know that Dauji has no milk and other provisions in his house, he immediately arranges to send some. Likewise, Susheel Azimabadi's short story, A Ray of Hope, is about a small village in Bihar where Muslims, though in minority, live in perfect harmony with the major Hindu community. The old Muslim couple, Tufan Mia and his wife Bafatin, has been abandoned by their sons, but are looked after by their Hindu neighbors as if they were their kith and kin. They are helped in every need of hour, but be it the renovation of the house or the reaping of the harvest. They do not feel the absence of their sons who have migrated to better places for better work opportunities. When, as a repercussion of Nuakhali rights, communal violence starts taking place, they are cautioned and given shelter by the progressive Raghubar and his son Chandar. Other Hindu neighbors join under the leadership of Raghubar to save the Muslims of the area at the cost of their own lives. In contrast to this, V.D. Savarkar, who largely writes about the events before the partition in several of his works, shows that there was no harmony or unity whatsoever between Hindu and Muslim communities because of the fundamental differences between them. Madhav Rao in V.D. Savarkar's play Uttar Kiya says, I quote, if the Muslims treat Bharat Mata as their mother and Hindus as brothers, we Hindus will treat them as brothers. This will form the basis of unity if they want it. If not, we are not afraid of disunity. Unquote. Similarly, in his novel Mopla, The Muslims Strike, Mopalian Che Band, Savarkar unabashedly discusses how the efforts of a Hindu-Muslim unity were being thwarted by the Muslims and Hindus were being cheated in a clandestine manner and attacked brazenly. On the issue of the unity, he writes in Mopla, I quote, if a person's act of throwing paraffin to accentuate an accidental fire at night in a village is both a social crime and sin, the others keeping one's eyes closed on the presumption that there is no fire is no less detrimental to him in the society. As putting paraffin into fire is not the proper way to put out the fire. Similarly, not giving out a call by shouting, "Get up, fire, run, fire," on the presumption that the sleeping persons will get disturbed is not the proper way to save the village from being gutted down in the fire. Unquote. In partition fiction, it is also to be noted that Muslims in Hindu-dominated areas are safe, but the Hindus in the Muslim-dominated are safe, but the Hindus in Muslim-dominated areas are unsafe. In the above cited stories, Abba stays in civil lines area, which is largely a Hindu-dominated area, and his family is safe. In Khushwant Singh's Train to Pakistan, violence takes place in Mano Majra, no doubt, but it is Jagga, a Sikh, who rises against his own community to save the Muslim passengers on the train. Dawoodji in Ashfaq Ahmad's Gadaria Shepherd is not safe in the Muslim-dominated area. His house is forcibly taken over and he is converted to a Muslim, though his life is spared after humiliating him and giving him a cut. In Savarkar's Mopla, the Hindus are not safe because Muslims are not only dominant but also united against Hindus, who because of caste factions remain divided. Hindus in the partition fiction try to help their Muslim neighbors and are successful many times in saving them by standing up even against their own community, but Muslims are devoid of such a courage. They simply show their lip sympathy towards Hindus and lay blame sometimes at the doors of the parting British, sometimes at those of Congress, and others at Hindu Mahasabha and RSS. However, it is Taslima Nasreen who in her Lajja categorically holds Muslims, the majority community responsible for perpetrating terror on Hindus, the minority community, and indulging in anti-Hindu riots that erupted in Bangladesh after the demolition of Babri Masjid in a remote town in a distant India in 1992. The book describes the fanatic bigotry directed at a Hindu family in Dhaka by fundamentalists among the majority Muslims. Though Taslima contends that Lajja is a book of protest against violence, hatred and killings that are going on all over the world in the name of religion. For placing the blame on the Muslim's head, she was pressurized by the Muslim community to withdraw her book, and even death threats were issued. The book was consequently banned in Bangladesh. Strictly speaking, Lajja is not a book of partition fiction, as its context is different, but in the larger context of understanding Hindu-Muslim relationship is a relevant text. Elsewhere also, Taslima is in unmistakable terms holds Bangladeshi Muslims to be a major contributor to global terror and holds that it's time people should stop saying Islam is a religion of peace. I quote, "You don't need poverty, illiteracy, frustration, America's foreign policy, Israel's conspiracy to become an Islamic terrorist. You need Islam." Unquote. No Muslims is facing a threat to her and had to leave her country, a threat to her life and had to leave her country. She was not granted political asylum after a certain period in India, and willy-nilly she had to move to Germany. The stories of the partition also speak of the harmony amongst the people of communities other than Hindus or Muslims during the communal violence. For example, in a short story, Moselle, Manto has presented a chicken-hearted, simpleton, lustful and immoral Sikh, Tirlochan, who readily agrees to shear his head and beard, the symbols of his Sikh identity, for the sake of marrying a modern Jew girl, Moselle. He is so much self-centered that he does not wish to stir out of his house to inquire about the welfare of his near and dear ones, despite the news of communal riots all around. He does not think it worthwhile to inquire after the safety of his sick fiancé and his family and her family. He rather wishes that her invalid parents should die and her brother should get killed in the communal violence. On the other hand, Muslims are presented as very brave and benign. Quote, who cared about the curfew though? If the Muslims in the chawl so desired, they could very easily get rid of Kripal Kaur and her parents. Unquote. Similarly, the only Jewish character presented by her name Moselle is all sincere, brave, clever and caring, though she appears to be shameless, callous, careless, cheat, inconsiderate, irresponsible, disloyal and immoral, who always ridicules the Sikh religion. Yet in reality, she displays just the opposite characteristics. It is she, not the Sikh fiancé, who helps Kripal Kaur in getting a safe passage by sacrificing her honor and life. However, reason was the first casualty during the events, then and the failure to give any plausible answers for the ensuing violence, even now is the second. It may be noted that most of these authors hail from those areas where the intensity of violence was the highest. Most of these authors are themselves displaced persons, left-oriented and had patronage of the ruling class. Are they telling only the convenient truth in their fiction? Most of the authors have tried to glorify their own communities by highlighting their humanitarian concerns, either because of their limited exposure of the reality or they are deliberately trying to remain realistic. In either case, they fail to do their duty to transcend the present and presenting the best and noble ideals in the form of characters. It is in this sense that their literature is not secular but sectarian. Most of them lay blame for the violence at the door of the outsiders of their other community. The only exception is Susheel Azimabadi's A Ray of Hope Amidst Darkness before the partition. But the inconvenient question as to why the same people lost mutual trust and thirsted for one another's blood after a particular date is swept under the carpet. The thin fabric of communal unity is torn just with a blow of communal rights. I quote, the merchants and the money lenders were running away, abandoning their houses, but others were keeping quiet. One day, in our street also some houses were burnt and scuffles took place. Curfew was imposed by police and military. After the curfew, Hindus and Sikhs started vacating their houses and fleeing away. Unquote. Dauji's family also goes away and their house is occupied by some unknown Muzahir Muslim. One day, Dauji tries to enter his house. When one day Dauji tries to enter his house, he is caught hold of by the new occupant of the house. He is made to read a kalma to convert him to a Muslim, though his life is spared after giving him a cut with a scythe. He is again given the task of herding the animals as a shepherd. A person who is incapable of saving himself from the ire of his wife could not have saved himself from the ire of the Muslim community. Even Golu, who had told Dauji that he cared for him, ran away from the scene when the moment to prove his words arrived. Saving Dauji from his wife would be called interference in their personal affairs, but saving them in the moment of crisis from an attack by a Muslim mob was a collective as well as individual responsibility of the persons who had been helped by Dauji. But no Muslim comes to rescue the family. Ashfaq is discursively making fun of a Hindu man, of the Hindu men who were ill-treated by their wives. On the contrary, no Muslim woman can dare to show her anger to her husband. The local Muslims are sympathetic but feel helpless like Golu, who disappears to save himself from the ire of the mob when he tries to intervene to help Dauji. In the violence, several Hindus are killed, including Chandar, in giving protection to the Muslims against a mob of about 3,000 men. The Muslims are rescued by the Indian military men and were sent for by Raghubar. Rumor mongering after Noakhali incident and instigation at the behest of the local Zamindar, Balram Singh, are told to be the major causes of riots. Azimabadi successfully narrates that Muslims were non-violent in this village of Bihar, and these were the Hindus who were creating the trouble and fighting amongst themselves over their dealings with Muslims. Since this short story has an ideological bias in showing that only the progressive Hindus were supporting the Muslims of the area and that the congressmen were abetting the violence, both the problem and solution suffer from certain kind of myopia. Azimabadi's story therefore remains a document of ideological representation of the social realism in place of becoming a good artistic piece. Most of the authors of the Partition fail in their larger duty of giving this wake-up call to both the communities, as a result of which the tension keeps on brewing instead of passions being pacified. The bridge cannot be kept unless we know where the gap lies. Thank you very much.